хотела бы представить еще одного нашего уважаемого спикера, Сьюзен Винникомби. Она профессор кафедры женщины и лидерства Крэнфилдской школы менеджмента, Великобритания, имеет много степеней образования. Исследовательские интересы Сьюзен сосредоточены на том, что именно на руководящих постах, и в частности в советах директоров компании, ощущается очень большая нехватка женщин. И как в качестве одной из важных характеристик Сьюзен я хочу сказать, что имя Сьюзен фигурировало в перечне самых влиятельных мыслителей согласно рейтингу журнала HR Magazine в 16, 17, 18, 19 годах. И вот я сейчас предоставляю слово вот этому самому одному из самых влиятельных мыслителей. Сьюзен, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much for those very kind and generous comments.
Excuse me, Susan.
I think I have slides, so I think somebody is going to put them up for me. But just as they come, I just want to say that I hope that my comments that I'm about to make will help to advance the conversation we're having here today in Russia. And before I begin, I just want to say that I noticed that you have a number of the speakers have spent a lot of time on talking about the business case for women on the board. And I must say that as an academic who has been studying this subject for over 20 years, I have never found a study anywhere, an academic study, showing the business case for all men on board. So that's an interesting thing for women to think about. But I agree with one of your previous speakers that actually it's not just the business case and the social case are very intertwined. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So every year at Crandfield, we produce an annual report that looks at the trends of women on our top boards. We look at the FTSE 350 with a particular focus on the FTSE 100. I started this work in 1999 when nobody spoke about women on the boards. So it's very interesting. But today I want to really focus on the last 10 years, because just like you in Russia, we in the UK were very stuck at a very low number. Back in 2010, we only had round about 10% women on our top FTSE 350 boards. So the Prime Minister decided that it was very important to have more women's leadership across business and set up the Lord Davis Independent Review of Women on Boards. And I was actually appointed to that board as the independent academic researcher. So we started this review and very quickly established that we needed to have some very bold actions. And as already been referred to in the conference today, many of the European countries actually went for quotas. And so we had quite a conversation about whether we should have quotas or targets. But the belief was in the UK from a number of our senior chairmen that if you actually have a quota, you just change the numbers of women on the board, and that what they were really keen to do was to change the whole culture of organizations so that we don't just see more women on the board, but we actually promote and foster gender diversity throughout the organization. So we decided to go for targets. And I think there is, often a popular view that targets is quite soft, but in fact, I just want to emphasize that in the UK, the targets that we set for women on board were very, very hard driven. The government got involved, the investors got involved and put pressure on companies to appoint women to the board. We worked with the executive search consultants, and they signed up to what we called a voluntary code, which required them to actually nominate women for the board positions. In the first place, on the Lord Davis Review, which the report came out at the start of 2011, we agreed that we would target 25% women on the board for the end of 2015. And we did achieve that. But what we noticed, and this comment has already been made in previous speeches today, that actually the women were appointed primarily to non-executive positions, independent board directors, as the Americans call them. So the Davis review was then followed by another review set up in 2016 in the UK, and it finishes at the end of this year, 2020. And that was the Hampton-Alexander Review. And the Hampton-Alexander Review was set up on a slightly different brief. It was, first of all, to extend the percentage of women on the board to 33%. And I think you've already heard from previous speakers about the importance of 33%. A lot of research has now been done to establish that where you only have one woman on the board, that can lead to tokenism. It's very difficult for one woman to have a voice on the board, and she's seen to represent all women. So actually, where you have a critical mass, you have a minimum of 3 women on the board, you have women not representing just the whole of their gender, but being independent voices on the board. So in 2016, Hampton-Alexander, and again, I was invited to be a member of the steering committee on this also, has set 33% not just for women on the board, but also for the 2 levels underneath it. So the management, what we call the leadership committee, and also the top level of the executive directors. Next slide, please. I just want to make reference to this. In addition to our report in 2008, and many of you in Russia and other countries may have the same comment, one of the chairmen said to me, "But Susan, the problem in the UK is we don't have enough talented women." And we were very keen, obviously, that we don't just put women on the board, but that they are top, competent, qualified women, obviously. So we were very surprised and puzzled by this comment that there aren't enough talented women. And so in 2008, we put together what we called the 100 Women to Watch. And we worked and reached out to all our networks to gather together and profile in a very public way 100 women who had not yet sat on our leading boards, but had actually had other significant leadership roles who we felt were suitable for appointment. Now, this actually was supposed to just happen 1 year, but it proved to be so popular that we continue to do it every year. And as you can see, that's this year's. So what I want to now move on to with that piece of background is just to show you where we are today. So next slide, please. So as I think has already been referred to today earlier on in the conference, is indeed in the UK, all the top FTSE 350 companies have hit 33%. Our report was based on data in June, so the figure of 34.5% for FTSE 100 is now over 35%, and FTSE 250 is at 33%. So that is absolutely fantastic progress when you think that 10 years ago we were at 10%. So I hope that this is an inspiring story for Russia, in that we didn't use quotas, but we really did reach out and involve all stakeholders in really trying to get behind what is a voluntary business target. And that was very important, and our government wanted the business community to own this. They didn't want to mandate it as other European countries have done. So we are in fact the only major country in the world to make progress with women on the board using targets. But as I have carefully said, we have used them, you know, in a very, very driven way, in my view. Now, there is a great variety across that 33%, and I must say that, so that when Lord Davis and later when Sir Philip Hampton have set their targets of 25% and then 33%, it was for every company to actually achieve that. And I have to tell you that that's actually not the case today. So in the FTSE 100, our top companies have 56% women on the board. So more than half the board are women, but there are other companies at the bottom of the ranking with just under 20%. So there's still a lot of work to do in terms of actually making sure that every company reaches critical mass of women on the board. So this has been a very big success, and I think it is, you know, we must recognize all the stakeholders involved in actually making this happen. But behind these big jumps in number of women on the board are two disappointments. So next slide, please. Next, thank you. So the first one is, and I'm sure others, this will be commented on, you know, in other countries and in Russia, is women are still not in executive director positions. So the UK went the target route because targets were believed to change the whole culture of the organization. And all I can say to you is that I think it is changing gradually, but it is very, very slow, glacial. So at the moment, if we just look at our top FTSE 100 companies, there are 5 CEOs. Well, there were 5 in June and there are now 7. And we only have 17 chief financial officers or group financial directors, which, considering many women in the UK go into finance, is really low. So we have a long, long way to go in terms of increasing the number of women in executive director roles. So that is one major challenge still facing us in the UK. And the other one, if we can turn to the next slide, please. So on the next slide, what we see is that despite the fact that so many women now sit on our top FTSE 100 boards, as you see here in that top line, 324 female-held non-executive directorships across the FTSE 100. And yet, where are the women in those top leadership roles? The number of chairs, women chairs, are only 8, which is really shocking considering how many women now sit on boards. And I'm not sure about the structure of Russian boards, but we then also have what we call the senior independent director. A few more women there, 21%. And in the last 2 years, we've been looking at who actually chairs the board committees like remuneration, nomination, and other sustainability. Actually, women chair a number of those sustainability committees. So 29%, which, you know, is better, but still nowhere near the near 40% of non-executive directorships held by women. So I think that it's really interesting to see the kind of glass ceilings within the glass ceilings on boards. And this is another major challenge for us. And I just will finish this slide by saying that, you know, Sir Philip Hampton, who actually is in charge of a number of appointment to chairs, I think made a very interesting comment to me that he believes that for every chair appointment, you have to shortlist 5 candidates, of whom you must have 2 women. If you only have 1 woman on a shortlist, it is almost inevitable that she will not get appointed because she is the outlier. And we tend to diminish the characteristics of that woman. But where there are at least 2 women on a shortlist, and that goes for not just chair position, but any position, they are much more likely to be seriously considered. So I would like to make that point. And then next slide, please. So I just want to finish by saying it's not only important that women sit in executive directorship roles and have senior roles on the board, like being chair and senior independent director, but actually it's very important in terms of nurturing women in leadership roles below the board. So we carried out a very interesting study. It's actually quite a complex piece of methodology called qualitative comparative analysis. Anyone who's interested in it, please just download the report from the Cránfield University website. But what we found, interestingly, is having a critical mass of women on boards just in NED roles is not sufficient to bring about real organizational change in terms of helping to increase the number of women in leadership roles. We must have women not only on the board, but women have to have real influential roles there to have that conversation and make sure that gender diversity thrives below the board as well. And I want to finish there. Thank you very much for your time.